that will change history. 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 That will be the most beautiful day.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for stopping by for our weekly intel report for the 22nd of March, for the week of the 22nd of March, 2023. We'll be going through our weekly round of reports here this evening, covering everything from the Ukraine war to the situation with China and Taiwan. We'll be covering North Korea as well as a variety of different topics this evening. If you haven't already, make sure to hit that like button. It's the best way to get the algorithm's attention. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. It's the only way to get notified when new videos and reports go live on our channel. It's also the only way to get access to our live stream chat over on the YouTube channel. Comment. I read all of your comments, guys. Make sure to leave a comment. Let us know what you think in the live chat. Towards the end of the show, we'll have a little bit of a Q&A session where I'll answer questions and read comments. So if you have any questions for me, maybe hold them till the end of the show when we do that Q&A. Consider sharing this stream. If you like this content, share it with your friends and family. It's the best way to get this information in the hands of more people, keep people informed. We also have a live poll going in our YouTube chat on tonight's stream. So if you hop over there to the YouTube chat, you can cast your vote in tonight's live chat poll, which is, do you think China will get more involved with the war in Ukraine by supplying weapons to Russia? Go ahead over there and cast your vote in that poll. And at the end of the show, we will go ahead and end that poll off, and we'll talk a little bit about the results. For those that don't know, we are dual streaming to both Twitch and YouTube. For those following along on Twitch this evening, thank you so much for being here with us. If you haven't hit that follow button yet, hit that follow button. To everybody that's subscribed over there, thank you so much for subscribing to the Twitch channel. Big shout out to OG Smiley, Mother Saki, and some of the other usuals which are tuning in over there on Twitch this evening. If you don't like tuning in on Twitch, you can always hop over to our YouTube channel and vice versa. If you don't like YouTube, you can always hop over onto Twitch and view us there. If you haven't already, if you don't know, we do have a Discord server, a Discord community server. You can find a link to that in the description beneath the stream or beneath this video, depending on how you're viewing this content. Everybody is welcome to join the Discord server. It's an excellent resource for up-to-date news and information on what's going on in the world. And not just that, but it's a great place to join in on the community that we've built here and to join in on the discussions. We'd love to hear from you over there on the Discord server. Without further ado, we're going to get into tonight's news reporting. We have a lot of different news stories to bring you this evening. There's a lot going on in the world right now, from the situation in Ukraine to the geopolitical situation with Russia and China, which we're going to be talking quite a bit about tonight. We also have some news out of Taiwan, with that situation there between Taiwan and China. We'll be talking about North Korea as well. So without further ado, we're going to get into our Ukraine main headlines first. It's day 393 of the ongoing war in Ukraine between the Ukrainians and Russia. I should say that we'll start with our main Ukraine headlines here first, then I'm going to probably jump into some of our other main headlines that we have from around the world this evening, and then we'll kind of later in the show get into the community aggregated reports and individual reports that we have surrounding the war in Ukraine. So stick around for that. We'll also be touching on some of our open source intelligence data that we have and talking a little bit about that as well towards the later half of the show. First up, though, we're going to go through our main Ukraine headlines, and I'm going to get hopped over into our battle map here so we could take a look at the situation on the ground in the east of the country of Ukraine. Here I'm zoomed into the city of Bakhmut there in the east of the country. But if we zoom out, you can see the full extent of the front line in eastern Ukraine here, and southern Ukraine as well, I should say. As we look at that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start reading off some of our primary headlines here related to the situation on the ground in Ukraine. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has visited the frontline military positions near the besieged eastern city of Bakhmut, which I was just showing you there on the map. During his visit, Zelensky heard, quote, reports on the operational situation and the course of hostilities on the front line. An official statement said that was released by Kyiv. He also was pictured meeting Ukrainian servicemen and held a moment of silence in memory of those who had fallen in the war. Meanwhile, at least 6 people have been killed overnight in a drone attack on Ryshiv in the Kyiv region. This actually came the night before last. The strike is reported to have hit a dormitory building and a school. The body of a 40-year-old man was pulled from the rubble there on one floor. According to its regional police chief, he added that more than 20 people were taken to the hospital after that attack. Ukraine's state broadcaster Susline is reporting that one of the people who died was, quote, an ambulance driver who came to that very call. In other news, at least 1 person has been killed and 33 wounded by a twin Russian missile strike on 2 residential buildings in Zaporizhia. Officials in Ukraine have said footage from a security camera captured the moment the strike hit, causing an explosion and a large plume of smoke to rise from 2 9-story buildings. And I actually have a video. I was going to wait till we got into our community aggregated portion of this news broadcast, but I have a video here posted by Kayuka from Twitter here that shows the strike in Zaporizhia here. This actually comes from Zelensky's Twitter here. It says, Zaporizhia right now, residential areas where ordinary people and children live are being fired at. This must not become just another day in Ukraine or anywhere else in the world. The world needs greater unity and determination to defeat Russian terror faster and protect lives. Let's take a look at the video here. So you can see that missile impacting that residential building there. We'll rewind that. You can actually see the missile incoming there to the building. And then you can kind of see some footage of the aftermath here. As emergency workers there were rushing to pull people from the rubble and put out those fires at that residential building. In other news, the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, Bridget Brink, tweeted in reaction to the attack, quote, after all the talk in Moscow yesterday between Vladimir Putin and President Xi Jinping, more Russian missiles and more drone attacks on civilians overnight make it perfectly clear how much interest President Putin has in a just peace or an end to the war he started. Russia's missile attack on that residential building in Zaporizhia this morning, quote, certainly could have been targeted at civilians, the White House has said. A senior Ukrainian official called it, quote, a specific deliberate strike at a residential building. It's obviously right out of the Russian playbook to target civilian infrastructure and to show no regard for avoiding the targeting of civilians. That comes from the White House's spokesperson, John Kirby. He added that the U.S. did not yet have tactile information specifically about that strike. In other news, Russia will not leave, quote, unanswered a UK plan to supply Ukraine with tank shells made of depleted uranium, its foreign ministry has said. Separately, the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said Britain's decision took the situation to new and dangerous levels. Britain's Foreign Secretary James Cleverly earlier today said there was, quote, no nuclear escalation in the country's decision. I have further reporting on this to bring you later in tonight's broadcast. Russia's Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Rybakov has said the risk of a nuclear conflict is at its highest level in decades. Russia was committed to keeping the world, quote, safe and free from the threat of nuclear war, he said, but added later that business could not continue as usual, given that Moscow was now quote, in a de facto state of open conflict with Washington. In other news, British military intelligence said on Wednesday there was a possibility that the Russian assault on the town of Bakhmut was losing the limited momentum it had obtained. This could be because, quote, some Russian Ministry of Defense units have been reallocated to other sectors, the Ministry of Defense said in its regular bulletin. Meanwhile, the International Committee of the Red Cross has said it is deeply concerned about the situation in Bakhmut and nearby communities around the front line there in eastern Ukraine, and the, quote, deep civilian suffering caused by constant military hostilities. Maria Zakharova, the Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson, has criticized the International Criminal Court, also known as the ICC, in The Hague for its decision to issue arrest warrants for Putin and the Russia's Children's Rights Commissioner, Maria Alexeyevna Lvova Belova, again, that one's kind of a mouthful there, over the alleged illegal deportation of Ukrainian children. She cited evacuations of children by the U.S. from Vietnam in the 1970s and said she was, quote, looking forward to the ICC acting against the U.S. leadership. The Russian-backed administration in Sevastopol in Crimea said on Wednesday it had suspended ferry routes around the port city. Shortly after the city's government said a Ukrainian drone attack had been repelled by air defenses. The RIA news agency reported that several radio stations were hacked in Crimea and that, quote, reports of a possible evacuation from the peninsula are false, authorities say. The spiritual head of the world's Orthodox Christians said on Wednesday that Russia's powerful Orthodox Church shared responsibility for the conflict in Ukraine, but that he stood ready to help in Russia's post-war spiritual regeneration, was the quote there. The comments coming from the Patriarch Bartholomew said, are there a rebuke for Russian Patriarch Kirill, whose vocal support for Moscow's invasion of Ukraine has kind of splittered the worldwide Orthodox Church, so to speak there. Meanwhile, here the U.S. has offered to sell Slovakia 12 new Bell AH-IZ Viper helicopters at a two-thirds discount after Bratislava sent its retired MiG-29 fighter jets to Ukraine. The defense minister, Jaroslav Nad, said on Wednesday. Back to the news about Crimea, by the way. We'll have more reports on that later in the show. I saw a few of you mentioned that. We do have some more information on the situation in Crimea that we'll get into later in the show. Paul in the live chat says, is this the same Nemico that started this last year? Indeed, it is, Paul. Says his voice sounds different. It's probably because I'm using a compressor on the microphone now. Cleans up that audio signal a little bit, hopefully. Hopefully I can be heard loud and clear tonight. Patty Wack, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Takey Jakey, good to see you. Katie Horton, Sydney, good to see you. Michelle, Doug, To everybody that's tuning in tonight, thank you so much for stopping by. We're just getting into our main Ukraine war headlines here. I'm kind of going through all of the main headlines we have pertaining to the Ukraine war, and then I'm going to get into more of our broader headlines for this evening here. In other Ukraine news, the International Monetary Fund said on Tuesday it had reached a staff-level agreement with Ukraine for a 4-year financing package worth about 15.6 billion U.S. dollars, or for our European viewers, that's about 12.7 billion euros, offering funds to the country needs the funds the country needs as it continues to defend itself against that bloody Russian invasion started last year. The agreement, which must still be ratified by the IMF's board, takes into consideration Ukraine's path to accession to the European Union after the war has come to a close. The fund said its executive board was expected to discuss approval in the coming weeks. Definitely some much-needed financial capital there that Ukraine will need to rebuild. President Xi Jinping of China and Russian President Vladimir Putin held meetings which concluded on Tuesday when the Chinese and Russian leaders signed a series of documents on a, quote, strategic cooperation after what Putin described as, quote, successful and constructive talks that showed China-Russian relations were at the highest point in the whole history of the two countries. That was directly from his quote there. The Chinese president's trip to Moscow has been viewed as, quote, a major boost for his strategic partner, Putin. I'll have much more in-depth reporting on this later in tonight's show. The Chinese president said he had an impartial position on the conflict in Ukraine and that it supported peace and dialogue. Russian state media reported. President Xi Jinping said talks with his Russian counterpart had been, quote, open and friendly. Putin, speaking at the joint news conference, said Beijing's proposal to end the Ukraine conflict could be the basis of a peaceful settlement when the West was ready for it. Xi has invited Putin to visit China later this year. Meanwhile, the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has said China is watching, quote, very carefully to see how Washington and the world respond to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. If Russia was allowed to attack Ukraine with impunity, it would, quote, open a Pandora's box for would-be aggressors and lead to a, quote, world of conflict, he told lawmakers at a U.S. Senate Appropriations Subcommittee hearing on Wednesday. Meanwhile, the White House National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby said the U.S. did not see China as capable of being an impartial mediator between Moscow and Kyiv over the war in Ukraine. He noted that China has continued to buy Russian oil even as the West has piled those sanctions on Moscow's energy industry, and said China kept, quote, parroting the Russian propaganda, which we've seen many times since the war has began, that parroting of a narrative, that parroting of that propaganda. In other news about Sweden, Sweden's parliament has formally approved a bill to allow the country to join NATO. Sweden and its neighbor Finland applied to join NATO back in May 22, abandoning decades of non-alignment after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The process has been held up by Turkey, which along with Hungary has yet to ratify the membership. Membership in NATO, quote, is the best way to safeguard Sweden's security. That came from the Swedish Foreign Minister, Tobias Billström, who said that during a nearly 7-hour debate this Wednesday. The Prince of Wales has traveled to Warsaw as part of a surprise 2-day trip to Poland to thank British and Polish troops for their efforts supporting Ukraine, as well as to learn more about how the country has cared for displaced Ukrainian refugees. Prince William became the first member of the royal family to meet troops in Poland during a visit that was kept secret until after his arrival. He will also meet the Polish president while in the country. So that about concludes our main Ukraine headlines. We're not going to get into some other primary headlines I have here for you guys for this evening. We'll then get into the in-depth Ukraine reporting. We'll go into the Situation Room over on the Discord server, look at that community aggregated news for you guys, and we'll also take a look at our open source intelligence data as well and see what that has to say. Paul, thank you so much for tuning in tonight. Says Nemico deepfake. Bonsai Bob says audio cut out when he answered. Definitely not the same Nemico. Or he also said the real Nemico never said as much. Yeah, the is I think that's trademark Nemico code. The specific amount of ums per report. So next we're going to get into our primary headlines here. I'm going to go over to our main screen here. So this is all of our main headlines from this week that I have to bring you guys here. This one comes from CBS News. It talks about Putin says Russia will, quote, respond accordingly if Ukraine gets those depleted uranium shells from the UK, claiming they have, quote, a nuclear component. Let's read a little bit into this article here. It says Russian President Vladimir Putin said on Tuesday that Moscow would, quote, respond accordingly. By the way, we've heard this rhetoric from the Kremlin a few times here about these depleted uranium shells. If Britain gives Ukrainian military supplies, including armor-piercing ammunition containing depleted uranium. Quote here, the UK announced not only the supply of tanks to Ukraine, but also shells with depleted uranium, Putin told reporters after talks at the Kremlin with his Chinese counterpart, Xi Jinping. Quote, I would like to note that if all this happens, then Russia will have to respond accordingly. The collective West is already starting to use weapons with a nuclear component. I had another article here about the same topic from The Guardian here. It says Putin did not elaborate, although the Russian leader frequently makes nuclear-related threats, largely in an effort to persuade Western countries to limit their interventions in the war in Ukraine, which was started by Moscow's invasion last year. Meanwhile, Sergei Shoigu, Russia's defense minister, said there were now fewer and fewer steps left before a, quote, potential nuclear collision between Russia and the West. Moscow has also has its own Sivnets 2 depleted uranium tank shells in its stockpile. I wouldn't be surprised if there was a handful of these or quite a few of these on the ground in Ukraine in use, in tanks, on the front lines in Ukraine. That's actually a good question. I don't think I've heard any direct reports that they're using depleted uranium shells, but I wouldn't put it past the Russians to already have at least a few of those lying around somewhere in the east of Ukraine near those front lines. Britain responded by accusing Russia of deliberately trying to disinform. Depleted uranium, quote, has nothing to do with nuclear weapons and capabilities, the UK Ministry of Defense said that it was a standard component used by militaries, including Russia itself. Russia knows this, the spokesperson added. In some China-Taiwan news, Honduras to switch ties from Taiwan to China. I reported on this very briefly in last week's report. I'll read you guys a little bit, some details here. The Honduran president, Castro, has said she has instructed her foreign minister to establish official relations with China, a move that would end its ties with Taiwan and further isolate the island on the world stage. The Central American country's switch from Taipei to Beijing would leave Taiwan with formal diplomatic ties with only 13 countries. China does not allow countries with which it has diplomatic relations to maintain official ties with Taiwan. Castro, who made the statement on Twitter on Tuesday, had raised the idea of cutting ties with Taiwan and starting relations with China during her electoral campaign. In the tweet on Tuesday, Castro said, the decision was a sign of my determination to fulfill the governmental plan and expand borders. The move comes weeks after her government announced it was negotiating with China to build a hydroelectric dam called Patuca 2. On Wednesday, Taiwan's foreign ministry said it had expressed, quote, serious concerns to the Honduran government over Castro's announcement, urging the country to carefully consider its decision and, quote, not fall into China's trap and destroy the long-term friendship between the two nations. In other news related to Honduras, Honduras denies demanding $2.5 billion in Taiwan aid before the China announcement. I can only read you guys the beginning here from Reuters here, but it says Honduras denied on Wednesday it had demanded $2.5 billion in aid from Taiwan before its announcement to seek to open relations with China. Instead, saying the country had repeatedly requested Taiwan buy Honduran public debt. Here are 5 key takeaways from President Xi Jinping and President Putin's talks in Moscow. It says here, Chinese leader Xi Jinping and Russian President Vladimir Putin have made a sweeping affirmation of their alignment across a host of issues and shared mistrust of the United States in a lengthy statement following talks between the two leaders in Moscow this week. Their meeting, which took place under the shadow of Russia's onslaught in Ukraine, left no question about Beijing's commitment to developing its rapport with Moscow, despite Putin's growing isolation on the global stage as its devastating war continues into its second year. It also failed to move the needle on bringing that conflict to resolution. Instead, Chinese president's 3-day visit to the Russian capital, which concluded Wednesday, was an opportunity for the two self-described friends to showcase their close personal rapport amid the pomp of a state visit, and lay out how they could advance a world order that counters one they see as led by Washington and its Democratic allies. The meeting culminated in more than a dozen agreements bolstering cooperation in areas from trade and technology to state propaganda, according to a Kremlin list. The leaders' central statement focused on how the two countries would, quote, deepen their relationship. President Xi's visit was contrasted by another key diplomatic mission to the region. Japanese Prime Minister and U.S. ally Fumio Kishida landed in Ukraine to sit down with Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky on Tuesday, further underlining how the conflict in Europe has also deepened divisions in Asia. Here's what you need to know, again, about President Xi Jinping's and Putin's meetings there in Moscow. No meaningful path forward on Ukraine. A new world order and alignment against the United States. That's a big one right there. Military mutual trust and defense ties, another pretty big one. Economic and energy boosts that are looking to work together economically here and in the energy sector. That's another big one here. And then talking about a divided world here. The optics of the Moscow summit was a deep contrast to the coinciding meeting in Ukraine between Zelensky and Japanese leader Kishida. Zelensky praised Kishida and other leaders who have visited as showing respect not only for Ukraine, but, quote, for the preservation and functioning of civilized rules and civilized life in the world. Quote, given Japan's strength, its leadership in Asia in defending peace and rules-based international order, and Japan's responsibility as the Group of Seven chair, our talks today can truly yield a global result, he said in his nightly address Tuesday. President Xi has yet to speak with Zelensky since the Russian invasion began, though a senior Ukrainian official told CNN Tuesday the discussions are underway between the two countries to organize a call between them about China's resolution proposal with, quote, nothing concrete. Talking a little bit more about how they pledged to shape, quote, a new world order as those talks occurred there between the Chinese and Russian president. It says here the two presidents have set their sights on shaping a new world order as the Chinese leader left Moscow on Wednesday, having made no direct support for Putin's war in Ukraine during his 2-day visit. Xi made a strong show of solidarity with Putin against the West, but he barely mentioned the Ukraine conflict and said on Tuesday that China had an impartial position. There was no sign that President Xi's efforts to play the role of peacemaker had yielded results. An interesting quote here. As President Xi departed, he told Putin, quote, now there are changes that haven't happened in 100 years. When we are together, we drive these changes. Putin said, I agree, to which Xi responded, take care of yourself, dear friend, please, he said. Some other updates here about the Ukraine war. Ukraine hit with deadly strikes after Chinese President Xi Jinping leaves Moscow. Zelensky visits the frontline city of Bakhmut, which I mentioned just a few moments ago. The main reason I had this article was for, if I could find it here. Okay, here. So, again, in other news, both Ukrainian and Russian officials said separately that Kyiv and Zaporizhia and Sevastopol in occupied Crimea had been... The Kyiv and Zaporizhia and Sevastopol in Russian-occupied Crimea had been targeted by drone and missile attacks Wednesday morning. Of course, I have more on that here shortly. In an article here from the BBC, Japanese and Chinese leaders visit opposing capitals in Ukraine war. So again, we had at the same time as the Chinese president visited Moscow, we had the Japanese Prime Minister here, Fumio Kishida, in Kyiv visiting with Zelensky. So kind of pretty significant coincidence there that we had both of these leaders on opposing sides of this conflict making these political visits here. Again, we had the visit by Zelensky to Bakhmut. And what they're saying, a very morale-boosting visit here, again, to the east of the country, to those frontline positions. I guess he wasn't directly on frontline positions, but he was near Bakhmut there. Gotta allow ads here so I can show you guys this article. This is an article that came from the LA Times. It talks about how China is not a credible peacemaker in the Ukraine war, which we've seen, obviously, from the results of these talks between Putin and Xi. It says, whatever else it produced, this week's visit of Chinese President Xi Jinping to Moscow did not advance the cause of a just peace in Ukraine. And, of course, we're going to get taken over by an ad here. If anything, Xi's cordial courtship of Vladimir Putin provided the Russian president with a publicity coup days after the International Criminal Court issued arrest warrants for Putin and a key minister alleging they committed war crimes. Under Xi, the People's Republic of China has asserted itself on the international stage. For example, leveraging its economic influence, China recently brokered a resumption of diplomatic relations between Iran and Saudi Arabia, which I reported on, I believe, in last week's report, or it might have been the one before that. A potentially positive development for peace and stability in the Middle East, but given its ever-close relationship with Russia, China cannot credibly play the role of peacemaker in Ukraine. Meanwhile, the U.S. is speeding up its Abrams tank delivery to the Ukraine war zone here. It says the Pentagon is speeding up its delivery of Abrams tanks to Ukraine, opting to send a refurbished older model that can be ready faster with the aim of getting the 70-ton battle powerhouses to the war zone by the fall, the Pentagon said Tuesday. Keep in mind, they have to train. They have to train people in on these platforms as well before they could just put them onto the front lines and start using them. The original plan was to send Ukraine 31 of the newer M1A2 Abrams, which could have taken a year or two to build up and ship. But officials said the decision was made to send the older M1A1 version because it can be taken from Army stocks. Officials said the M1A1 also will be easier for Ukrainian forces to learn, to use, and maintain as they fight the invading Russian forces. In a statement here from John Kirby from the U.S. here, on Russia giving award for hitting that U.S. drone. He said pilot was, quote, at best just an idiot. So let's go ahead and read this here. It says a White House National Security spokesperson, John Kirby, said Russia awarding the 2 pilots who downed a U.S. drone earlier this month was, quote, insulting, and that the Kremlin must have a different definition of bravery. Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu gave the Orders of Courage award earlier on Wednesday to the fighter pilots who were involved in the downing. U.S. officials have said that a Russian fighter jet struck the U.S. MQ-9 Reaper drone last week, damaging its propeller and forcing it to splash down in the Black Sea. Quote, I don't know of another military in the world, another air force in the world that would award a pilot for smashing into a drone. If that's bravery, then I guess they've got a different definition of it. It's ludicrous. It's insulting, Kirby said on Wednesday. Quote, in the Navy I grew up in, you don't want to hit anything. Hitting anything's bad for you. I'm sorry, I've got to throw the flag on this one. I have no clue why they would give a bravery award to a pilot who is at worst maliciously putting himself and U.S. property at great risk, and at best just an idiot, Kirby, an admiral in the U.S. Navy, added. Another report here coming from Fox News says Ukraine says it's time to, quote, leave after Russian cruise missiles destroyed in that Crimean strike. A spokesperson for Ukraine's Operational Command South on Tuesday told Russian occupiers that it was time to leave after Russian cruise missiles were destroyed in a drone strike in Crimea. Ukraine's military intelligence agency said on Monday that an explosion in the northern city of Daznotkoy on the Crimean Peninsula destroyed Caliber NK cruise missiles while they were being transported by railway. Russian news outlets later reported that drone strikes targeted the areas as a train transporting the high-value cruise missiles passed through. Dzhankoi is a hub station. Even at the beginning of a full-scale invasion, it was said that the defeat of a logistics would be the main means of influencing the enemy's ideas of what to do in Crimea. Came from Natalia Homenoyuk, head of the Joint Press Center for Ukraine's Operational Command South, said Tuesday, according to a translation by Pravda, now the course is clearly set that they need to leave. In some North Korea news here, it says North Korea fires multiple cruise missiles off its east coast. South Korea says. It says here North Korea fired multiple cruise missiles off its east coast Wednesday as its rival South Korea and the United States held joint military exercises. This came from the South Korean military. Article by Fox News here talks a little bit more about that. Launches another set of missiles amid U.S. calls for UN intervention. Let's take a look at this video we have here for you. First, we're going to have to get through the ad, of course. Let me mute that for you guys.
Here reacts to the U.S. allocate military exercise. So how such kind of security cooperation can work to deter North Korea?
Right. So I think, again, it's important to just kind of take a step back here. And the exercises that the United States conducts with Japan and with South Korea are defensive in nature and meant to bolster our interoperability and meant to deter potential aggression in the region. And so that's first and foremost. And so in terms of North Korea's reactions to these types of exercises, as you heard me say before, not only is it inappropriate, it's destabilizing. And concerning, clearly, to those in the region. But I think what's important for people to understand is, one, deterrence continues to work. Despite launching missiles into the ocean, North Korea is not attacking, and nor should they, and that the United States, Japan, South Korea, and other allies and partners in the region will continue to work together to extend that deterrence and to keep our countries safe. Again, with the ultimate objective here being a secure, safe, prosperous, free, and open Indo-Pacific region.
Okay. Says here, North Korea fired yet another round of missiles as the United States seeks greater intervention from member states of the United Nations. South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff reported the latest round of missiles at 10:15 a.m. local time on Wednesday. The weapons appear to have been fired from the South Haemyeong province, according to reports. Quote, "We will successfully wrap up our Freedom Shield exercises as planned under firm combined defense posture," the U.S. military said in a statement, according to Reuters. So this is a video here that we have, again, coming from NBC, talking a little bit about those these other missiles here that North Korea has launched alongside these U.S. South Korean war games. So let's take a look at this video here.
This morning, North Korea has launched multiple cruise missiles into the Sea of Japan. That's according to South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff. And the timing is significant as the largest set of U.S. and South Korea war games in 5 years comes to an end today. NBC News foreign correspondent Josh Letterman joins us now from Seoul, South Korea. Josh, good morning. So this is the first time in several years the U.S. has ramped up its military drills with South Korea. You spoke to some of the soldiers on the ground there today. What exactly did they tell you?
Yeah, that's right, Zinclay. Those military drills had to be scaled back several years ago, first under former President Trump when he was pursuing diplomacy with Kim Jong-un, and then because of the COVID-19 pandemic. But the threat has really not gone away, as you can see from those cruise missiles launched just today that you were mentioning. In fact, last year, North Korea launched more than 70 missiles, the most of any year, and their weapons programs are only developing even further, according to U.S. military officials. And I spoke at the beginning of today's live fire exercises with Lieutenant Drew Scott, who's been serving for about a half a year here in South Korea. He is from New Canaan, Connecticut, and he told me about the stakes of these exercises. Listen. How does it feel to be practicing for a potential conflict just 20 miles south of the DMZ?
So, we got to go up to the DMZ and kind of look into North Korea and essentially see all their defenses. It brings a lot of gravity to the table for sure. But I think, especially with the men, they really understand that, while we're here, there's a very serious mission, and that any sort of aggression that comes from the north is really what we're here to counter.
Do you feel ready if conflict were to break out here tonight?
100%, absolutely.
Now, the U.S. says that these exercises are completely defensive in nature, Zinclay. They say that it is critical that they rehearse the skills they would have to actually use in the most realistic way possible if it actually came to defending the peninsula. And today we watched as they really deployed an array of military hardware, from Apache attack helicopters to attack aircraft, all kinds of mortar and artillery, as well as, for one of the first times, drones, Zinclay.
Josh, notably, as you're saying that, I'm mindful that these drills are close to the border with North Korea, and the proximity to the DMZ plays a huge role here. So what can you tell us about that and what it means for tensions with the North?
Yeah, absolutely. I spoke with one of the commanders of today's exercises who said there's nothing that focuses U.S. troops on their mission here, like the fact that they are sleeping every night roughly 10 miles from the DMZ, that, heavily fortified area between North and South Korea. But the North Koreans, they are clearly very upset about these exercises, calling them a provocation. They believe it's a rehearsal for war. And just today, we heard from North Korea's foreign ministry blasting the U.S. position on this, saying that any effort to rid North Korea of its nuclear weapons would be tantamount to a declaration of war, Zinclay.
Important reporting. Josh Letterman, thank you.
Your music.
In this next one, we have a video of North Korea's Supreme Leader Kim Jong-un. He has a mock nuclear counterattack against the U.S. and South Korea after two countries took part in those joint air drills. So let's take a look at this video here.
From North Korea's ruthless dictator, an imposing show of force. According to state media, Kim Jong-un today told his country it has to be ready to launch nuclear counterstrikes against its enemies. This comes just after Kim, according to his media arm, guided a set of tactical drills over the weekend that simulated a nuclear counterattack, including the launch of a ballistic missile with a mock nuclear warhead on it, which exploded in the air.
Kim Jong-un is operationalizing the capability to do a salvo attack on South Korea or Japan with multiple missiles, multiple nuclear warheads.
North Korea revealed its nuclear counterattack drills after the United States and South Korea took part in joint air drills on Sunday. Drills featuring strategic bombers, stealth planes, and fighter jets.
We see those drills as a deterrent, as a way of deterring Kim Jong-un from attacking South Korea. He sees them as a provocation. He thinks this is a pretext for invasion techniques.
Kim is continuing what's become an aggressive streak. Last Thursday, North Korea test-launched what it said was a Hwasong-17 intercontinental ballistic missile, a weapon capable of hitting the continental U.S., its fourth ICBM launch in less than a year. Analysts say Kim is trying to perfect and expand his arsenal of those missiles.
We can expect that this year, North Korea will not stop the provocative missile tests for their development of a solid-fuel ICBM.
A solid-fuel ICBM, analysts say, would give North Korea more flexibility because those missiles can be launched more quickly than others. Also, just last week, Kim's forces test-fired cruise missiles from a submarine. The Supreme Leader has appeared at many of these events, including the latest nuclear counterattack drills, alongside his young daughter. She's believed to be about 9 years old and named Kim Ju-ae.
This is the coming out party for his daughter. This is the future of North Korean leadership. She's going to be around for decades.
There's no sign that Kim Jong-un is seriously ill or that he would leave power anytime soon. And it's not clear if he's actually preparing his daughter to take power if and when he does. But analysts are certainly paying attention to the two young women by his side, his daughter and his younger sister, Kim Yo-jong, who's had a meteoric rise in power.
There's no indication that either the sister or the daughter would pursue any different or softer policies towards North Korea's neighbors than the three generations already have.
In some further news here related to North Korea, it says here the U.S. says China and Russia are blocking UN action on North Korea. Let's take a look here in this article from APnews.com. It says the United States accused China and Russia on Monday of shielding North Korea from any action by the UN Security Council for its unprecedented state of intercontinental ballistic missile launches, which violate multiple UN resolutions and jeopardize international aviation and maritime safety. U.S. Ambassador Linda Thomas Greenfield told a council meeting that Chinese and Russian obstructionism was encouraging North Korea to launch ballistic missiles with impunity and advance its development of more sophisticated and dangerous weapons. After the meeting, she read a statement on behalf of council members Albania, Ecuador, France, Japan, Malta, Switzerland, and the United Arab Emirates, United Kingdom, joined by South Korea, that condemned the launches by North Korea. It said the growing crisis threatens not only the region but global peace and stability, and called for the Security Council to speak again with one voice. Unlike Thomas Greenfield in her remarks, the statement did not name China, Russia, though it clearly referred to them. In an article here from the Moscow Times, says situation in Sevastopol under control as Russian Navy repels drone attack, it says. The Russian Navy, quote, repelled a drone attack on the port of Sevastopol in Moscow, annexed Crimea early on Wednesday, the Kremlin-backed governor of the city said. The peninsula, seized by Russia from Ukraine in 2014, is home to Moscow's Black Sea Fleet and has been hit by a series of drone attacks since the Kremlin's offensive in Ukraine. The attack came just 4 days after President Vladimir Putin made a surprise visit to Sevastopol. Quote, in total, 3 objects have been destroyed. The Russian-installed governor Mikhail Reznik Hizayev said on Telegram, he said military personnel had shot at the drones with, quote, small arms, and that air defense was also working. He added there were no casualties and claimed no ships had been damaged, but said the explosions blew out windows in nearby buildings. These included the Moscow House Cultural Center, as well as building that is beyond a well-known building that is beyond the port there. From Newsweek, it says Crimea explosions reported as Ukraine launches more drone attacks. This was posted the 22nd at 6:08 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. It says here, Ukraine has launched drone attacks near Sevastopol, according to Crimean city's governor. They follow other strikes this week in the north of the peninsula, which Kyiv has insisted it must take back from Russian occupation. Ukrainian naval drones had tried to strike coastal bays in Sevastopol. However, they had been stopped by Russia's Black Sea Fleet. The Moscow-backed Sevastopol governor, Mikhail, said on his Telegram channel, video of a fire near the entrance to the Sevastopol Bay is circulating on social media, although it was unclear exactly what was burning. He wrote that around 5 a.m. Wednesday, 3 objects had been destroyed. He added that a Navy crew had fired at them using only small arms, and that air defense was also involved in the downing of those objects. The warships were not damaged. I believe I have a video to show you guys of this as well from our community aggregated news here, but we'll have to wait to get into that here in just a few moments. This article here comes from Yahoo News. It talks about explosions in Sevastopol caused by a marine drone attack. The Russian puppet administrator of Sevastopol claimed that the Russian fleet had allegedly repelled the attack of autonomous surface vehicles. Said there's information about evacuation from the peninsula by ferry and other nonsense. Obviously, it's a lie. They said that, again, refers to those hacks which occurred on a Russian television network and I believe radio as well, which were ordering people to evacuate the peninsula. Article here from thedrive.com says Ukraine situation report. Sevastopol attacked by drones from sea and air. This is actually a screenshot here from that video, which I guess for the sake of being consistent here, I'm going to show you guys the video here. It's posted by Kayuka on Ukraine front lines on Twitter. This is a verified Twitter source here. It says, for those who didn't know about the morning fireworks in occupied Sevastopol, Crimea. Let's take a look at this video. So you can see the outgoing air defense systems there. I should note here on the right side of the screen, you'll see them trailing through the sky there. See a pretty significant explosion there. One second here, ladies and gentlemen. Oh yeah, Kayuka pointed out to me, obviously, yeah, these are marine UAVs. So that must be tracer fire we're seeing and not air defense, question mark? He says they are shooting at ground UAVs. It is a boat UAV Ukraine has. Yeah, we've heard of them using these before. If we rewind here, so that it might be tracer fire, question mark? Is that what we're seeing here? So So you see quite a massive explosion there. So yeah, Kayuka says, yeah, they fire at the sea surface and the tracer fly. They basically hit the water and they skip like a rock. So we are indeed seeing tracer fire there. In fact, actually, you could see them firing from over here somewhere. Trying to hit this UAV, which is somewhere here. I would take it. So it's coming into the port here. You know what's interesting is this little thing that zips in here. It's coming from this way. I'm not sure if that's fire coming from a ship or maybe just another firing position over here towards. I don't know. This is kind of hard to tell here what exactly is coming inbound, but you can see it there. And I'm not sure if it ricochets off the surface of the water there. And then the explosion happens pretty much immediately after. Not sure if that's more tracer fire or something else. This little thing we're seeing here on screen. Yeah, quite a significant explosion there. Yeah, it's definitely more tracer fire here. Yeah, Kayuka says he's not even sure on that one. I'm not sure exactly what that is. Maybe it could be tracer fire coming from another position, another firing position at that boat. Unsure, but again, that's a pretty significant explosion nonetheless there in Sevastopol. In some news relating to that encounter with the U.S. drone and the Russian aircraft last week. It says U.S. flying surveillance drones farther south over Black Sea after that collision with Russian fighter jet, officials say. It says here, the U.S. is flying its surveillance drones farther south above the Black Sea after a Russian jet collided with a U.S. drone last week, according to two U.S. officials. The drone flights have remained in international airspace, but since the collision between one of the Russian jets and the MQ-9 Reaper drone last Tuesday, the U.S. has moved its drone flights further away from airspace surrounding the Crimean Peninsula and eastern portions of the Black Sea. One of the officials said the routes are part of, quote, an effort to avoid being too provocative, as the Biden administration remains careful to avoid an incident that could potentially escalate into a direct conflict between the U.S. and Russian forces. The officials said the drone flights would continue this way for the time being, but added there is already an appetite to return to the routes closer to Russian-held territory. The officials also said Russia may try to unilaterally declare a broader closure of airspace around the southern and eastern Ukraine in an attempt to force U.S. drone flights farther out. On Tuesday, Flight Radar 24, a commercial flight tracking website, which, by the way, us here, we are very familiar with, showed a U.S. RQ-4 Global Hawk remaining in the southern and southwestern portions of the Black Sea at an altitude of approximately 52,000 feet. Pentagon Press Secretary Brigadier General Pat Ryder said Tuesday the U.S. was continuing to operate drones over the Black Sea, quote, flying in international airspace in accordance with international law, but he declined to say whether the U.S. had changed its routes or mission profiles following last week's encounter between a U.S. spy drone and two Russian fighter jets. Quote from him says, I'm not going to, for operational security reasons, not going to get into the specifics of the routes, missions, timelines, things like that, Ryder said at a press briefing. Some other news about that drone that was down. Russia reportedly recovers some debris from that U.S. drone downed in the Black Sea. Moscow has recovered parts of that surveillance drone the U.S. had to down in the Black Sea last week. I like how it says here, the way that they worded this is interesting. It says, Moscow has recovered parts of a surveillance drone the U.S. had to down, but I mean, yeah, I know it's like they downed it. The way that they word it makes them sound like they decided to down it. No, they did not decide to down it. It was disabled by that Russian fighter aircraft, and then subsequently lost control and dove into the Black Sea. I know they did have before the drone reached the water, they were able to wipe like the data off the drone. I know that much, but from what I read, from what I've heard, there was no direct decision to push a button and to descend the aircraft. It descended due to damage to those props that were help keeping it aloft. It says here, Russian military conversations between personnel on ships and in aircraft discussing the MQ-9 Reaper were captured by radio hobbyists beginning about 8 hours after the drone was damaged after being struck by a Russian fighter jet. The audio recordings picked up by the hobbyists while monitoring public airwaves indicate that debris, including parts of an engine's case, nose, wing, and gas tank, were recovered. There's no sign that the Russians were able to retrieve any sensitive technology, but the report points out that the recordings contained audio interference and military code words that make them hard to understand, as you would expect in the middle of a wartime. Even though Russia isn't known for encrypting its radio communications very well. It says here, MQ-9 drones used mainly to gather intelligence, often carry an array of high-tech components, including sensors, communications, equipment, and precision weapons. I don't think this one had any weapons on board, but I know it did have, some you could say high-tech components for conducting surveillance. It says here, quote, so we are quite confident that whatever was of value is no longer of value. General Miley had told reporters, Defense Secretary Mark Milley, who had said that last week, that the U.S. military took, quote, mitigating measures to ensure that valuable intelligence would not be recovered by foreign actors. Again, it was a $30 million drone, just to put that in perspective for you guys. So that about concludes my main headlines that I have for this evening. We're now going to hop into some of our community aggregated news here. Give me one moment here to get some stuff up on screen here for you guys. So our first report this evening is our Ministry of Defense intelligence update, posted by Cayuga. Thank you so much, Cayuga, as always. Again, this is the latest defense intelligence update on the situation in Ukraine for the 22nd of March, 2023, from the UK Ministry of Defense. It says here, over the recent days, Ukrainian forces initiated a local counterattack to the west of the Donetsk Oblast town of Bakhmut, which is likely to relieve pressure on the threatened H-32 supply route. That's Highway 32, for those who don't know. Fighting continues around the town center, and the Ukrainian defense remains at risk from envelopment from the north and south. However, there is a realistic possibility that the Russian assault on the town is losing the limited momentum it had obtained, partially because of some Russian MOD units have been reallocated to other sectors. Again, thank you to Cayuga for posting that. So this came from Ukrainska Pravda, posted by Cayuga. Air raid warnings issued in Kyiv and a number of Ukrainian oblasts. Source here, alerts.in.ua, which I believe is the same. Yeah, that's the same exact platform that we use to track those air raid alerts. It says details. In addition to the city of Kyiv, air raid warnings were issued in Kyiv, Chernihiv, Poltava, Cherkasy, Zhytomyr, and Sumy oblasts. Kyiv Oblast Military Administration reported the threat of a drone attack, and the Oblast Air Defense Forces were ready to repel it. An update at about 1:50, air raid warnings spread to Rivne and Khelminsky oblasts. Update at 3:15, air raid warnings were also issued in Dnipropetrovsk, Ternopil, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, Kirovohrad. Update at 3:45, all clears were given at 3:45. And at 4:50, more all clears were given for Kyiv and most of the oblasts. That came earlier on Wednesday. Some other reports said air defense was deployed in Kyiv Oblast, repelling Russian drone attacks. Air defenses were operating in Zhytomyr Oblast, repelling attack by Russian drones. Explosions ring out in Kelyminsky. An explosion rang out in the city of Kelyminsky in western Ukraine after an air raid warning was issued in Kelyminsky Oblast on the night of the 21st through 22nd of March. Got a report from that drone tech in Kyiv. 8 people have been killed in a Russian drone attack in the town of Rezneshiv in the Kyiv region, and 4 people may stay under the rubble at this time. We had that video which I showed you earlier, but I'll show you again here. This came from Zelensky on Twitter. Again, this shows that missile attack on that apartment building. A post here coming from Ukrainiform. It says President Vladimir Zelensky has stated that Russia is shelling Zaporizhia with bestial savagery, hitting residential areas. We read you that tweet from him earlier. He underscored that this must not be just another day in Ukraine or anywhere else in Europe or the world. The world needs greater unity and determination to defeat Russian terror faster and protect lives. Again, I'll show you we just watched the clip, but here I'll show it to you again on screen. Again, that's that Russian missile hitting that residential building in Zaporizhia. The official number of people injured in the Zaporizhia missile attack rises to 33. So 33 people were injured. Another report from Ukrainska Pravda. Sevastopol authorities report downing of the 3 drones. I mentioned that earlier. Report from Sevastopol. Authorities say they called for evacuation from Crimea on radio after that drone attack. There are reports of radio signals being intercepted on one or other radio station. They're spreading information about evacuation from the peninsula using ferry crossings and other nonsense. According to Rezahayev, this is not true. Rezahayev warned that in the event of real danger, messages would be broadcast on all channels simultaneously. Our next report here coming from Cayuca. This one was requested by a few people that I showed today. So this is definitely pretty interesting. This video shows a massive delivery of KFC. Yeah, you heard that right. Kentucky Fried Chicken to the hotel in Moscow hosting the Chinese delegation. I'm using the note the apparent preference for American food even while plotting against America. So President Xi either has a thing for KFC or some of their cabinet members, possibly. Some of the delegation had a thing for KFC, so they decided to order KFC while in Moscow for this meeting between President Xi Jinping and Russian President Vladimir Putin. Let's take a look at this KFC order here. Is this all? I don't think you guys can see this because of the, one second, I'm gonna, there we go, let's get that out of the way. All right, on screen here, I believe that is Kentucky Fried. I can see the Colonel's face right there. This is a ton of KFC. I'm about one, yeah, that is definitely the Colonel's face right there. First of all, I didn't even know they had KFC in Moscow. In Russia, I didn't know they had KFC. Somebody asked original or crispy. They probably got both with how much chicken is right there. I mean, that's like a 50-person order right there, maybe 25, 50 people. worth of chicken? I mean, that looks like a lot of chicken. At least they got chicken. Takey Jakey says KGB, KFC. I mean, this is a ridiculous amount of chicken. But anyway, I figured that'd be a good way to end our community aggregated reports on a lighter note here. I also had a report about T-54s. Where's the T-54 stuff? Here we go. So I had a report. Yeah, I can't skip this one. This one's too good. We got to talk about this one. So these come from Cayuca, from Noel, Oryx, Clash Report. I'll bring those, and CIT. So it's real. According to CIT, Russia has removed T-54/55 from storage. Photographs of a train transporting military equipment from the Far East was spotted. The tanks were identified as T-54s/T-55s. So, I mean, yeah, these are pretty old. What year is the T-54? I mean, it's a Soviet model. 1945 we're talking about. What's next? We're probably going to see, we'll be seeing T-34s rolling around next at this rate. But those are definitely T-54s there. It'd be very interesting to see some footage of these being used in Ukraine. Says Russia appears to be bringing T-54s, T-55s out of storage for deployment in Ukraine. So T-54B, so it's a modernized variant. Is that what I... reported footage of Russian T-54 tanks heading to Ukraine. So... kind of hard to tell. Footage a little blurry here. Could be those T-54s, maybe. Oh, wait, hold up. Let's zoom in there. Okay. Got another video here. Those look like T-54s. Again, I'm no tank expert here, but so I believe what's interesting. This is I believe this photo is from 1985. With the showing the T-55s here, and for 2023, that's a pretty interesting photograph. But with that T-54 post, that about caps off the community aggregated news I had for you. We're now going to jump into our open source intelligence stuff, starting with our live universal awareness map here. So we'll go ahead and hop over onto that. I'm going to go through the last 12 hours or so of news from live universal awareness map. We actually only have a few posts, so I'll scroll back a little farther here. We'll go back to 15 hours ago. Fire after Russian missile hit that residential house in Zaporizhia. So this is from that video I was showing you guys earlier. You could clearly see that missile inbound on the target in that frame there. Just kind of a blur of a line there, but that's that incoming missile. 14 hours ago, President Zelensky visited frontline positions in Bakhmut. I reported on that earlier. 14 hours ago, Russian missile hit that residential house. So it's interesting how they had the report staggered here, 15 hours and then 14 hours. But yeah, here is that video, again, which I just showed you. This will be the third time I've showed it this evening. Quite a significant explosion there, damaging that residential building. So Kayuka says the first clash report video has been confirmed to be 2022, so first video is no good. I forgot to remove it. That's totally cool. So just to confirm, guys, this first video that we showed of the airborne, I knew it looked a little bit suspicious. If I could find it again. Here we go. So this clip here is from 2022. And this one is current, if I'm not mistaken, Kayuka. One of the videos is legit. So there are T-54s/55s heading into Ukraine. 13 hours ago here, 1 person killed, 25 wounded as a result of that Russian missile strike at that residential house in Zaporizhia. We now know that injured has risen to 33, I believe we're at now. Kayuka confirms, yes, that second video is new. The other video is old, from 2022. Death toll of Russian drone attack in Kyiv region increased to 7. Unfortunately, lost their lives there. 7 people to that drone attack. 11 hours ago, 3 people killed as a result of landmine explosion in Sinnoharivka area of Mykolaiv region. See where that occurred there on the map. And finally, 10 hours ago, Russian army conducted missile strikes at Kostolenivka. Again, take a look here at this video here from Telegram, I believe. And there is nothing to show in that video. What looks to be a plume of smoke off in the distance there, but again, it's kind of hard to tell, so take that one with a grain of salt there. But we know that that there was a missile strike at that area from the map here. As for aircraft this evening, we don't got too much going on in the skies tonight. It's been a pretty quiet evening, at least over Ukraine. Filtering for military aircraft here, we pretty much have nothing in and around the combat theater. We have RCH-151, C-17, Globemaster 3 doing its thing over here over Europe. In the U.S., a little bit busier of an evening for military aircraft here in the U.S., that's for sure. Nothing too crazy out of the ordinary this evening, but quite a few military aircraft up at this time, as you can see. Quite a bit of a swarm here over the U.S. in comparison to Europe at this hour. Over here in the South Pacific, got a few U.S. military aircraft hanging out, doing their thing. If we head over to Flight Radar, we can take a look and see the top tracked flights for tonight. Number 2 is AN-26. Heading over Germany, I believe. Not a lot of information on that at this time. Top tracked flight is Japan Airlines from Miami to Tokyo. No Forte, no drones up in the air tonight as well. So again, pretty business as usual this evening for aircraft. Maritime, naval-wise, not too much to report in that area as well. Heading back over to our battle map for Ukraine. Basically been the same along the eastern front here in Ukraine. I mean, there's been slight gains here by the Russians. The Ukrainians have, the lines have been pushed back and forth here over the past week. As it's been for the recent, in recent months. Bakhmut, they've made slight progress, but again, that's been slowing down here in the past few days. We held a vote in one of our recent reports, asking our viewers, how long do you think Bakhmut would stand? And a lot of people were saying 3 days. A lot of people said, 24 hours when we did that vote. a week, 2 weeks, but I think it is starting to look like we are definitely going to be seeing a protracted long-term push here for Bakhmut over the next month or so, maybe even longer, before the Russians are actually able to take Bakhmut. I don't think they're going to pull out of this area anytime soon. I'm pretty sure they're pretty dedicated to the cause of taking Bakhmut here into Russian control. The Ukrainians are just as dedicated to defending it. So again, it's going to be a kind of a grinding conflict here in Bakhmut, probably for the foreseeable future here, until Russia can successfully conduct that pincer movement and cut off the Ukrainians in Bakhmut. We'll now start our Q&A session. If you guys have any questions or comments, go ahead, leave them in the live chat. Also, if you haven't voted in tonight's live chat poll yet, go ahead and do that now, because I'm about to end that live chat poll, and we will talk about the results of that. Tonight's poll question was, do you think China will get more involved with the war in Ukraine by supplying weapons to Russia? So again, if you haven't voted in that, go vote in that real quick, and I'll end that off here just in a few minutes. K-Man says, Paul, you'd know the answer if you ate more KFC. I actually don't have KFC where I live. I think that my nearest KFC is like 100 miles or more from where I'm at. I haven't had KFC in quite a while. Mother Saki says they finally got the tanks to go with them. Jesse Adams says T-54s have bore evacuators on the end of the gun tube. Those are definitely 54 variants. Interesting. Panikius says, I lurk on r/Ukraine, and there's a lot of footage of EU-US arms arriving in Poland and Ukraine. Yeah, I see quite a bit of that as well. Jesse says 55s look like them, but the bore evacs are on further down on the tube. That's interesting. Hugo, thank you so much for tuning in tonight. Ookton, glad to see you. Leroy Jacobs says, Nemico, this may be a premature question, but what is your end game prediction for this war? I don't like to give end game predictions, nor do I really like to give predictions at all. It's really hard. Like, at one point in the conflict, maybe earlier when this conflict first broke out, like it was kind of easy to start to drum up a picture of what things were going to look like. But, after the twists and turns we've had during this war, just the monumental failures by Russia to really complete any of their objectives here, it's really hard to tell where this is going to go. And I think that's why this is so dangerous, is because I don't think anybody really knows where it's going to go. And the possibility of a miscalculation occurring here is so dramatically high that that's why this is so dangerous. It's because every day, as this escalates, the possibility of a miscalculation here, somebody doing something, to make the pot boil over, so to speak. You know what I mean? I think that's what we're looking at here. I don't like to make definitive predictions, though, of where this is going to go. I do believe Ukraine has a good chance to defend its territory. I also believe the Russians, if they continue throwing bodies at the problem, will eventually make some kind of progress. I also think if they are unable to make progress, they're going to, as I said, I've talked about this before, Russia with their kind of scorched earth policy, if they can't have it, nobody can. I could see, something where, Russia pulls out, but they destroy everything on the way. There's always the possibility of Russia getting backed into a corner and this escalating to an extreme, to a nuclear extreme. Even though unlikely, I would like to say unlikely, it is a definitive possibility that we have to keep, our minds and be very aware of. So again, I hear people say, I hear experts, intelligence experts say the words that they say, Ukraine, if Ukraine loses, this goes nuclear. And then I hear other experts saying, if Russia loses, this goes nuclear. So it's kind of like you're between a rock and a hard place. I hear people saying that, I hear experts say that Ukraine will push Russia out, and Russia will just concede and try to pull itself together and recover politically and economically. I've heard people say that there's no way Russia will ever recover from this. I mean, there's so many different ways this could go. K-Man says, bro, you need to take the drive to get some. I think referring to KFC there. Yeah, eventually, maybe this summer. Leroy says, Nemico, you are missing nothing by not having access to KFC. I do have access. I just have to get in the car and drive for a while. The account, aka Kayuka, says, I will have to jump off now, go to bed, catch you all next time or on Nemico Discord. Thank you so much, Kayuka, for tuning in tonight. Speedy Squirrel says, KFC is super popular here. 100 of them, at least in Dubai alone. No way. I did not know KFC was that popular internationally. Michelle Welch says, love KFC. Now I'm hungry for KFC. I guess this has been turned into one big ad for KFC now. Just Me says, it's a matter of time. It's new. It will happen sooner or later, I think. Interesting. Leroy Jenkins says, so this is what I get from Nemico. Quote, I don't like predictions, but we're all going to die. Thank you, LOL JK. Yeah, I hope and pray that we don't all die, but in the event that shit does hit the fan, I will be here to bring you the news and reports, nonetheless. Before we stop our Q&A, I'm going to end off our community poll this evening. Again, the question was, do you think China will get more involved in the war in Ukraine by supplying weapons to Russia? An overwhelming 83% of you said yes. Only 16% said no. I'm going to post results to that in the Situation Room over on the Discord. But interesting that so many of you, that quite a large majority here, thinks that China is going to get more directly involved and provide weapons or supplies, weapons, ammunitions, whatever it may be, to Russia. Very interesting. K-Man says, bro's going to report everything while his house is in flames. Yeah, I'll run to the bunker. We'll get into the bunker, and we'll be on the air, bring you guys the latest and greatest. That's the idea. Okay, so we ended the poll. We got through our Q&A here. Before I kind of do my ending monologue, so to speak, I'd just like to touch on the Sign My Rocket fundraiser, which we submitted. I think 4 days from now will be 3 weeks since we submitted it. So we should be getting the video in here soon from the front lines of Ukraine. In the next, hopefully it'll be in for next week's report, crossing fingers, but I'm pretty pumped to be bringing you guys that, so just wanted to update everybody on that. Pretty excited to get that video and add it to our intro for our live streams here. It'd be pretty cool. I'm also going to just upload it as a standalone video on the channel. I think that'd be kind of cool, as a short or something. We'll figure it out. Also, guys, if you haven't, joined the Discord server. There's a link to that in the description below. Everybody's welcome to join. I'm going to leave the stream up after this live report. We're going to leave the stream up by request. Some people requested that just to hang out and talk. So I'll kind of like passively switch it over to the 24/7 Intel stream after I'm done talking here. But I will keep it up for a few hours, or at least for a little while here while I finish up on my end. Yeah, make sure to hit the like button, guys, if you haven't already. Best way to get the algorithm's attention. If you haven't subscribed yet, consider subscribing. It's the best way to support the channel. It's also the only way to get access to the live chat. Leave us your comments. Join the live chat. Let us know what you think. If you like this content, share the stream. Share it with your friends and family. It's the best way to get this information in the hands of more people. Consider supporting the channel. You can find links to all that, to our merch and stuff down in the description below. We live stream both on Twitch and YouTube every week. To those on Twitch that are hanging out with us tonight, thank you so much for being here with us. If you haven't already, hit that follow button. Join the Discord, guys. We're here every week, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, to give you this live weekly report. When we're not here live, you can find us over on the Discord server. Join it. Great resource for information. Great place to join in on the discussion. To everybody that tuned in tonight, thank you guys so much for stopping by here. We'll be back here next week. I'll also have some videos uploaded for you guys this week. Our weekly Intel summary video, which is a condensed version of this report, will most likely be live either late tomorrow or the next day. We'll get that out to you guys. So that's kind of a condensed weekly summary of everything that's been going on in the world. Let me get switched back over to our Situation Room feed here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play I'll play the outro, and then we'll switch back into the Situation Room here, and then you guys can hang out and chat for a little while, and I'll probably leave the stream up for 30 minutes, maybe a little longer than that, maybe a few hours. We'll see how it goes. All right, guys. Until next time, you are watching Nemico Network.